Growing up, Rareware made some of my favorite games ever, including both Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong Country. These games had such a profounding impact on me as a kid that I still go back to play them on an almost yearly basis, and even have my ringtone as the amazing underwater level, Aquatic Ambiance. So when several former Rare developers formed a new studio, Playtonic, and made a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie, I immediately signed up and funded them on Kickstarter. And while many people were left disappointed, I felt satisfied with the Nintendo 64-like 3D platformer. But this time around, Playtonic decided to go in a different direction with the Buddy Duo and decided to make a spiritual successor to Donkey Kong Country with a 2D platformer. And in what is a surprising bit of circumstances, it doesn't just live up to the huge expectations, but it exceeds them in almost every way possible. This is my review of Yooka Laylee and the Impossible Lair. So let's get the big one out of the way. Yes, this game is very similar to Donkey Kong Country, but not necessarily the Donkey Kong Country from the 90s, but in many ways it's more similar to Retro's Donkey Kong Country Returns franchise. This comparison should in no way hinder your experience, but instead, if you like the Donkey Kong Country franchise, new or old, I can assure you right away that you're going to like this game. While there is several similarities between the two, including the roll jumps, similar mechanics, shooting barrels, and weight, there's also several differences that makes the Impossible Lair unique, and maybe even better. One thing you'll quickly realize is the emphasis on the overworld, because unlike most 2D platformers, its overworld is very interactive and can even be considered a game on its own. It almost reminds me of the isometric Zelda games where you're trying to solve puzzles to get to the next area, and while the puzzles are never overly complicated, they're enjoyable. As you progress, you will be able to unlock new items that can help you solve previous puzzles, such as bombs to blow up walls, fire to burn away thorns, and other oddities. It also allows you to meet the many memorable characters that Playtonic is so great at making, such as Trowser the Snake, who always finds a way to get as much money out of you as he possibly can. And in the Impossible Lair, you quite literally have to pay him to remove paywalls to unlock your next destination. And the Impossible Lair is filled with this sort of charm and humor. And speaking of payments, there is 2 different currencies in the Impossible Lair. In each level there is 5 hidden coins that you can find, and at times they can be in hidden locations, while others will have you completing just a little bit of an extra challenge to achieve your goal. These coins are used to pay Trowser, while quills are used to unlock Playtonic and cages in the overworld. Playtonics themselves are used to alter the game in some shape or form, whether that be a different coat of paint, or even gameplay elements such as the hover mechanic that reminds me a lot of Dixie Kong in Donkey Kong Country 2. Though anytime you use a Playtonic, you're in a way putting a handicap on yourself, making the game easier, and because of this, the game balances itself out by giving you less quills at the end of each level. And speaking of challenges, the Impossible Lair is one of the more challenging 2D platformer games on the market right now. While at the beginning of the game they kind of ease you into the world, the difficulty really starts to ramp up as you progress. There is a few options to overcome this challenge if you find yourself frustrated, such as the several Playtonics I had mentioned before, or if you die too many times at a given checkpoint, you can decide to skip to the next checkpoint if you find yourself overly frustrated. While I do not recommend this option, it's nice to have for those who don't want an overly challenging game. Though this will not aid you in all scenarios, considering the name of the game is the Impossible Lair, which is actually an insanely difficult level with no checkpoints at all. At the very beginning of the game, you have the option to try and complete this level, and if you do, in a way you're actually completing the game. The problem is the level is so difficult that it's almost impossible to complete when you first begin the game. Instead, you must beat the other levels in the overworld to unlock a battalion, which gives you a sort of invincibility. So with each battalion that you have, you will then be able to take 1 extra hit in the Impossible Lair, and make this level just a little bit more manageable. Now, for those really seeking out a challenge, there's always a possibility that you could beat the Impossible Lair without any battalion at all, but this isn't meant for the faint of heart. With that said, you can always play the other levels in the game, and that's not just to make the Impossible Lair easier, but frankly because it's such a fun game throughout. The levels are brilliantly designed with plenty of hidden secrets and tight controls, and within the overworld you can even alter a level to be drastically different. In such cases, you can fill a level with water by flooding a book or spitting an ice seed on the pages to turn a level into a winter wonderland of sorts. It not only changes how a level can be played, but adds diversity to the game, which I think is very important in 2D platforming games. And that is the thing about Yooka Laylee and the Impossible Lair. In almost everything Playtonic does, they do it masterfully, from the Zelda-like Overworld, to the tight platforming, the music done by Grant Kirkhope and David Wise, the charming sense of humor, the level design, the challenge, and the list goes on and on. So the question of whether or not Playtonic can make a good game based on Rare's rich past should end here. Not only is Yooka Laylee and the Impossible Lair a good game, but it's a great game that lives up to the lofty expectations of the Donkey Kong Country franchise, new and old. Now, I personally can't wait to see what Playtonic does next.